Boy, I'll tell you what. Was it the 19th? Was it January 19th of last year Trump was inaugurated? It was the 20th? Okay, so we are just 2 nights away from the eve of Trump's inauguration. And I think, as President Trump said when he went on the Alex Jones show, give me a year, I think you'll be impressed. Folks, I think the storm is about to hit. I think the entire deep state's about to be exposed. Obama's DOJ, Obama's FBI, Fusion GPS, Hillary Clinton, all working together to try to steal an election from the American people, and then as an insurance policy, illegally spy on Trump and his campaign team to fabricate information and then entrap members of his campaign team. This is amazing. Steve Pieczenik joins us now. Dr. Pieczenik, I'm blown away right now. I'm blown away by what's going on in the House Intelligence Committee. I'm blown away by what's going on in the Judiciary Committees. I'm blown away by these Fusion GPS testimonies going public. For the first time ever, I have more confidence that the storm, we are honestly on the edge of the storm. I'm starting to feel the storm come, Steve. What are you seeing here?
Well, I'm glad you feel the storm come, but quite frankly, the storm was over a year ago when we brought in Trump. What you're seeing now is basically the aftermath of a major storm that had occurred with no one really understanding how Trump came in and how we and the intelligence community and others had helped to bring Trump to the forefront. The storm is over. Hillary is over. Mueller is over. The FBI is over. The CIA, certain elements are over. That's why Pompeo, who was #1 at West Point, was put in. We have several military generals in charge. We have every congressional district. We have a military installation or project. So basically, we're not worried about any Democrats or congressmen. If you look at the map of the United States, we in the intelligence and military community are basically in charge, and Trump is on top of that. And I'm not upset about it, and I'll tell you why. When Alex allowed us to come on the air, we basically said it's all over for Hillary, it's all over for Obama, for Bush Jr. And what we tagged it to, and what I said was, their affiliation wasn't just with the Democratic Party. It was a little bit more sinister, as you call the deep state. It was with the CIA, but certain elements of the CIA, which have been cleaned out and will be cleaned out. And those were the elements associated with John Brennan, a whole bunch of Democrats or Catholics in action, as we call them. And we've put in a military officer. And I know Petraeus was there, but unfortunately, he failed us. And because he failed us for many reasons, he was honey trapped. He allowed weapons to go through Benghazi and other problems. He was dismissed. And in turn, what really comes out of this is the Republic is very much intact. You're representative of it. Within a year, Owen Schroyer has his show, and I think it's great. I think Alex Jones has been proven to be correct. And quite frankly, what you're seeing now are the debris of a major, major revolution that occurred when Trump came in. And the aftermath is just not really all that significant. What is significant is that, #1, North Korea and South Korea have just aligned themselves. It's unbelievable. In 30 years, we've never had this kind of relationship where literally North Korea and South Korea are participating in the Winter Olympics. Has anybody talked about that? Has anybody said anything about that? That is a major, major geopolitical advancement of the degree that none of us in 5 different administrations would have ever imagined. And it was Trump who did it. We had a tax reduction. Trump did that. We have peace in Syria. Trump did that, albeit we lost. Nevertheless, peace in Syria. Iraq, we finished the war. Trump did that. We're going to finish the war in Afghanistan because the generals have full command and control of our soldiers and drone warfare. We'll finish that. Trump did it. So basically, I agree with everything you said, but really the focus has to be on a much larger scale, Owen. I don't belittle anything you said, but they're irrelevant. The congressional committees are irrelevant. The senators are irrelevant. It's what I've said a long time ago. You're more relevant than any congressman or senator. You have far more of an effect, and so does Alex, than anybody realizes. And the reality is that it overrides, and I'm not being patronizing. This has been going on for 20 years. Since 9/11, this has been the revolution that I have wanted, that many others have wanted, that those in the military and the intelligence community have wanted. And so it's come through your format, Alex's format. And so what you're seeing now is just a debris of insignificant individuals. Believe it or not, Hillary was already destroyed the second she was played into the fact that she attacked Alex Jones. This was a ploy that we used, and I couldn't believe, quite frankly, she was stupid enough to do it. And she did it. And once that happened and gave legitimacy to Alex Jones from the extreme left and from a crook like Hillary, it was all finished. And kind of Alex knew that, and I said it that day, I couldn't believe that would happen. So what you're seeing, with all due respect, Owen, is the aftermath of a major revolution that occurred because good people within the intelligence community and the military took responsibility for the republic, and the American public understood what had to happen. Whether the ideology is left or whether you're millennial, it's almost insignificant. If you're not willing to participate in the republic, in the democracy that we created, then you're not relevant. You have been a participant. You went and took on a show of your own, and I'm very proud of that. And so are others who see it, because that would never have happened had we had CNN legitimacy, had we had MSNBC. They're not relevant. They're finished. Zucker knows it. The industry knows it. Hollywood is finished. I mean, what you're hearing is the end result of a man like De Niro, who calls the president a fucking idiot. I mean, you're talking about a patsy, an effete man, and a guy who never went to school, never went to college, never served our country, plays and acting, makes believe that he's a tough Italian. And he insults the Italian personality. And the Sons of Italy even said, this guy is a Finocchio, he's nothing. And so we call him a Stronzi. But the reality is the left isn't relevant. The De Niros aren't relevant. The Meryl Streeps aren't relevant. They're all part of a dying institution, Hollywood, the Congress, the Senate. What's happening is the governors are more important, the commissioners are more important, our intelligence is far more important, our military is far more important, and they've come up to the basic, the rise in power. We've just taken down the FBI. Part of the FBI did a very good job in counterintelligence, for example. They just took down a Chinese spy, or Mr. Gerald Lee, an American Chinese who worked with the Chinese and in fact caused the death of several of our CIA operatives and informants in China, yet nobody talks about it. And the reality is that was a very good counterintelligence operation. That should be commended for the FBI. Yeah, the other FBI that's dealing with the committees and all that, those guys will probably disappear. Mueller will probably resign. There will be others who come and go. The major point is that the republic is intact, thanks to people like you, thanks to our military, thanks to our intelligence communities. And the congressmen and senators really are irrelevant. They're just showboats. We don't need them. With the internet, we can do whatever we needed. And ironically, that would make it far more of a democracy. The irony is that no one's picking up the fact that really the president used Twitter not only to destroy the Democrats, but is really using it as a distraction and denial mechanism to most of the people who aren't aware of what's going on around the world. And our economy is the strongest economy. We're still moving forward. The dollar will be the strongest economy. China's in trouble. Japan is in trouble. Europe is in trouble. And so what's happening is, we're not looking at the overall success that's going on, but we're getting caught in the minutia. I don't blame you for being excited about it, but the real revolution occurred a long time ago when we basically took down Hillary, and it was Alex Jones and your shows that helped us to do it. So
Well, thank you. And we're about to go to break here, and it's not just, it's all of us together. I mean, I want to get into this on the other side, because you talked about some things in your monologue there that I've never heard you actually talk about on air. So it sounds to me like you're willing to discuss it more. So let's get more into the secrets of the Trump revolution on the other side with Dr. Steve Pieczenik. Look at that smile. He's ready to break the secrets, folks. Look at it. We broke Pieczenik today. Welcome back to the War Room. Owen Schroyer with you. My guest, Steve Pieczenik, breaking it down as usual. And I want to talk about the Trump revolution, the roots of the Trump revolution, which Dr. Pieczenik was talking about in the last segment. Steve, I've never heard you talk about this on air. We've discussed it before between ourselves, but I'm curious if you want to get more into this. Talk about when the Trump revolution actually started, because I think it's very important for the people to understand that this was a well thought out, well concocted revolution by patriots inside intelligence communities, inside the military, to create a massive system, a thruster, if you will, for Donald Trump to penetrate the White House and get in this pro-American agenda that he's got in. Enlighten the audience about how this was thought out and concocted years before we even knew it was happening.
Let's go back. I think the major precipitant for most people, we would say, would be the 9/11 episode. It was no question in my mind and the minds of others who'd been in the military and the intelligence community. That was the neocons, as we talked about. It was Bush, Cheney, Condoleezza, a whole bunch of them who'd been involved. And we had looked for access to outlets. And the radio outlets were very limited. And of course, the newspapers like the New York Times had been co-opted by an editor named Bill Keller, who was just a second-rate novelist, but more importantly, his father, his family was in the oil business, so they were connected to Cheney. So we knew a lot of the newspapers were compromised, the Washington Post, the New York Times, et cetera, et cetera. In turn, those of us who had served in the military, and I won't go into detail, and those of us who have been in the intelligence community began to understand that when the Iraq War was created and fabricated for no reason whatsoever other than the fact that they wanted to make Israel the central point of a Middle East policy and take down Saddam Hussein, and it had to do with oil and all other types of issues. They had already alienated many of us who understood that the neocon position was totally false. It was basically based on premises of nonsensical ideas that Israel would be the Middle East and we would be the primary power all over the Middle East. And they didn't understand that we would be engaged in wars most of the time. And so we had to neutralize the neocons. That's where I came in, and I understood each one of them. Wolfowitz, Pearl, Hadley, Sandy Berger, they'd all been at Cornell behind me. They'd also never served in our military. So we had a campaign where we hit the neocons personally and professionally on the air and with blogs. And at the same time, the military began to understand that when they were in Iraq, they were being used, and there was really no purpose to go in there and take out Saddam Hussein as we see right now. And in fact, what happened is Iran became the real victor. And Wolfowitz was too stupid to really develop any kind of post-invasion schemata. And I had warned.
So just to pause real quick, to put it into layman's terms. So the military's waking up as they were sent to these foreign wars that we don't belong in. Meanwhile, human intelligence was pushing out the real information.
Correct. And in fact, what was happening is there was a division within the intelligence community, I could say, between our military intelligence, which is really what I've allied with most of my life, and the civilian or the CIA at that particular point in time. The Brennans, the Tennants, who really was never an intelligent. That Tennant was nothing but a whore that was co-opted and brought in from the congressional committees and used by the Bush administration. So we immediately understood that, one, we would go after Bush, two, we would go after Clinton because Bush and Clinton had allied, and then we would go after the families involved, and not physically, but intellectually, in terms of psyops, in terms of economic warfare. And that involved an Alex Jones and primarily the conservative wing that began to understand that the Bushes really were not Republicans, that they were not conservative, and that we began to support candidates out of Montana. Stephen Quayle was involved, and other people began to get involved in the conservative movement, where we started to clean out what was called the remaining part of the Republican Party, people like McCain and others who we had to circle around. But at the same time, we knew very quickly that Hillary could not run or would be successful. We would not allow her to be successful. And actually, I can't say the name of the individual who told me that at the time Hillary was running against Obama, and I didn't know who Obama was at the time, I was asked this question, and it was by a key Democratic legislator who asked me the following: If you knew that Bill Clinton was still messing around with other women what would you say about the race between Hillary and Obama? And there was no question in my mind that Hillary would lose automatically, and that Obama, whoever he was, and I didn't know who he was at that time, was going to be the primary candidate. But also, we in the intelligence community knew a lot about Obama, contrary to his stories and his nonsense and the manifestations of a life that he said. He was an African American, his father was Kenyan. Of course, the person he never talked about was the most important person, and that was his mother, who was a CIA operative. And in all due respect to her, she was quite formidable. She came from the Midwest. She was a white woman, Caucasian, who had studied and gotten a PhD in anthropology. Now, when you get a PhD in anthropology, or I get a PhD at MIT, you're automatically tagged by the CIA or an intelligence community because you become a very important asset to the United States. Not only was she important, she was also trained in Russian and understood Indonesia. So she was sent to Indonesia to evaluate and assess Russian influence in Suharto. The rest became nonsense. I mean, Obama was born of this woman. He's American only by the fact that this woman was an American operative. He never talked about her. He never went to Columbia. He went to Occidental College, which was where we put all the ex-CIA operatives in Los Angeles. And then he came in on affirmative action at Harvard. So immediately we in the intelligence community said, okay, if this is what you want to produce out of Brennan and Tenet and all the other failed DCI, CIA directors, then we will push back, and we will show you how we push back, because we couldn't accept this kind of false candidate. And in fact, when Trump began to run, we weren't sure about him. We had 16 candidates, but for the most part, it was clear to us that the only one who could break the paradigm or break the kind of the paradigm of the past was a man who had been independent of wealth, independent in personality, and who had a very unusual temperament, who could really rile up the system. And there was Donald Trump. Now, when everybody called him mentally insane, I came to the forefront and said, fine, I would like to indict and incriminate every psychiatrist who's never seen him, who's never evaluated him. At the same time, I would like to convict every medical doctor who said he's going to die. And in fact, what happened is a rear admiral from the White House, who's been a great physician, said he is competent, he's great health. Guess what? He's going to live a few years, and he's going to be quite effective. We in the community understood that. And in turn, there were those of us who said, look, he's going to need some command and control capacity that doesn't revolve around politicians or people who really haven't spent their life.
Right, so you're about to get into the guts of it. Dr. Pieczenik, can you stick with us for one more segment?
Yeah, sure.
All right, we're gonna keep you for one more segment here. And it also turns out that Yale psychiatrist ended up being a fake psychiatrist. She didn't even have a license to practice anymore. A total fraud. Of course, that's the one that all the mainstream media goes after. But we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of the Trump revolution, how it started, and why we're here with Dr. Steve Pieczenik, another segment. Don't go anywhere. All right, Dr. Steve Pieczenik has been breaking down the storm that's actually been brewing for decades now, a direct response to the false flag attack in New York City on 9/11. Patriots inside intelligence communities and the military decided to start acting then. And Dr. Pieczenik, you were just breaking this down, and you were kind of getting to the point now where members of the military that you were working with and intelligence agencies you were working with decided to jolt Trump into office.
What happened was, in effect, the way we can summarize is to say between the Bush family and the Clinton family, they were completely self-destructive. And we saw that very quickly. They were really destroying the republic in the guise of trying to serve it. Bush Jr. had really destroyed this country and was one of the worst presidents we've ever had. Bush Sr. backed him up. And of course, Bill Clinton was a disaster. So we understood that this could not continue anymore. And then when Hillary came in, and I told you, basically her husband basically preempted her. She'd never had the guts or the ability to say, look, I divorce you, this is not working, but he's compromised her career. And quite frankly, she's so self-destructive, it was very easy for guys like me to take her down psychologically when she really was attacking me through the Alex Jones show. So that was the second element. The third element that really mobilized us was the Umar Abedin corruption when she was in the State Department. When she started to receive $400,000 as a, quote, assistant to the Secretary of State and was receiving 200,000 or hundreds of thousands from another corporation, that really triggered a lot of my companions and colleagues in the intelligence community and the military to say, look, this is so corrupt, it's beyond tolerable. A certain amount of corruption exists in any system, but this was beyond corruption. And so we had an incompetent individual like Huma Abedin. We had an incompetent Secretary of State who was given that position out of just pity, and we had an incompetent president along with an incompetent vice president. And that basically was a warning to the military and the intelligence community. We could no longer afford this. We could no longer afford 30 years worth of incompetency, starting with Bill Clinton, going through Bush, Bush Jr., Bush Sr., and Jeb, who wanted to run. We would negate that. And then we didn't want Hillary Clinton. So that was where the mobilizing features that occurred.
So the patriots inside the intelligence communities and the military realized one more president like the status quo, like the deep state, it would destroy America. And you guys decided to take action.
Well, I had taken action long before by revealing the identities of the people in the neocons who were involved in the stand down the false flag. For me, it was my mother's milk. That was easy for me to say, and it was easy for me to take on Rumsfeld, who basically reaffirmed it, that they were involved in a false flag. Because the day after 9/11, he said, well, those people who disagree with what we did in the Republican Party should also accept the fact that the Democrats did the false flag in Pearl Harbor, basically admitting what the University of Chicago had written and what Wohlstetter and Paul Wolfowitz had written. So it was really kind of stupid. In reality, we understood all that. And basically, we picked Trump, or Trump came in, and he was the candidate we wanted to have. In turn, we were able to use other individuals. And I think in this case, Julian Assange should be commended for the amount of help that he provided America at a time when we were really in trouble. And that's why I've always proposed that he become an honorary American citizen. And that's what I would recommend to Trump, because he really did a lot for the Republic in terms of WikiLeaks. And in that WikiLeaks, we were able to reveal a lot of information that the public hadn't known. And so that was really a kind of what we say, a friendly conspiratorial a relationship. Now, in terms of the presidency itself, we had to let Obama finish up. People said, no, we should take him out. I said, that's nonsense. You know, he's the president, let him finish up. Basically, his record will be almost nil and void, or null and void. And that's what Trump did. In effect, he uncovered or took apart everything that Obama did, and we realigned everything. So the intelligence community was cleaned out. What you're seeing now is the remnants of the revolution, where the people who were affected now realize what happened to them a year ago, but it's too late. And in fact, they were totally co-opted by my colleagues, my friends in the community, including the FBI and the CIA and military intelligence and the Defense Department. These were real Americans who were concerned about the Republic, and as well as civilians. So we had a real revolution. What you're seeing now is debris of that revolution, and there's very little they can do about it. So the senators like Cory Booker, I mean, totally ineffectual, a total.
Well, he's just a total joke. I mean, he embarrassed himself. But let me ask you this, because to the general population and to the layman out there, it looks like now, because of Matt Gaetz and DeSantis and everybody talking about these reports exposing Fusion GPS and connecting the dots, it seems like this is the storm about to hit. So I think the average American asks now, what is the deep state response to them about to be exposed fully and perhaps even put in jail? But you're saying that the response to this, the storm, is actually kind of behind us now. They already had a year, 2 years. That's been their response. The fake Russia dossier, the fake collusion, Trump's a racist, everything about Trump. You're saying that was their response, and they've already lost. It's over for them.
It's over. Basically, we're not even answering it because it's so childish, so immature, so ineffectual, that this is the reason why we were able to be so successful. Contrary to what most people felt or understood about Hillary, she was not as bright as everybody thought. She was not strategic. She had no sense of strategy. She had no sense of psychological insight.
She had no message. She had to take 2 weeks off just before a debate.
Well, not only that, but we posited that she was physically ill and she had to prove that. So every time we put up a barrier, she literally got hit by that barrier. Was she physically ill? Well, it took time for her to say, no, I wasn't physically ill. Then we questioned, was she mentally ill? Then she took out time. In other words, every time she advanced, we could hit back. And that took time and effort on their part. Meanwhile, Trump just scooted around and used a thing called a Twitter. While she was spending $100 million, Trump was using something cost him a couple of bucks and used Twitter, which totally.
Yeah, and flying around the country on his own jet, and doing it all on his own accord. We don't have much time here left. So it sounds to me like Gates and DeSantis and Gowdy are basically going to be cashing in on all the work done behind the scenes by the military and the intelligence agency. They're going to look like the heroes when this finally comes down. But one more question here before we go, because
the heroes are really there. They know who they are. These guys are not relevant, but go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm just saying because it looks to me like they're about to blow the doors off of this thing, and the work has already been laid.
Go ahead.
So. But I gotta go back to 9/11 because that's where we started this whole thing where you're breaking it all down about when the Patriots decided to actually try to save this country. It started years ago. Now we've reached this point. But going back to 9/11, I've heard different conspiracy theories. President Trump is obviously in the industry of building buildings. He knows about skyscrapers. What does President Trump know or think, or are you privy to anything Trump feels about the 9/11 attacks?
Well, President Trump, I don't know him personally, but with all due respect, he said it very clearly years ago. He said those buildings were well constructed. He knew very well as a developer who was involved. He knew very well which Jews were involved. He knew very well which units of the Mossad operatives were involved. He knew everything about it. Whether he wants to talk about it, that's up to him. But he knew almost everything about 9/11. He knew almost everything about that building. There wasn't.
Do you think we're getting closer to 9/11 truth, Dr. Steve Pieczenik?
I think so. I think in time it'll come out, but it takes time for the American public to really absorb it, and for the New York Times to say, "Well, we made a mistake," and the Washington Post to say we made it. They're not going to do
that. I think that that's why President Trump doesn't want to talk about it right now and just kind of go along with it as normal. Great stuff from Dr. Steve Pieczenik. That is truly amazing stuff. Dr. Pieczenik, thank you for joining us. We'll be right back with Mike Adams.